Night over the Bay of Biscay. A U-boat slices through black Atlantic swells, diesel engines rumbling low. On deck, sailors scan the horizon. The war feels distant out here. No searchlights, no convoys, no escort destroyers. Then, a sound. Not the heavy drone of a bomber. Not the lumbering beat of a Sunderland flying boat. A sharp, rising snarl from the darkness above. Banded at 2 o'clock. Oh, low. But it's already too late. Out of the moonlit clouds dives a twin-engine Predator. Slim, fast, almost ghost-like. No warning radar return. No time to dive. Cannon fire rips across the U-boat's conning tower. Rockets streak downward, exploding against steel and spray. The Atlantic Ocean in 1943 was a graveyard. Convoys burned beneath cold rain. Merchant ships vanished in the night. Survivors clung to debris while oil slicks spread across black water like spilled ink. The German U-boat fleet, the wolf packs, were strangling Britain's lifeline. Food, fuel, ammunition. Every cargo ship lost meant hunger at home and weakness at the front. And the U-boat commanders believed they owned the night. Surfacing after dark to recharge batteries, they would cruise the surface at full diesel power. Faster. Harder to detect. Confident. They knew that most Allied aircraft were too slow to intercept them before they could dive. By the time radar picked them up, the submarine was already slipping beneath the waves. But something had changed. In scattered reports sent back to German Naval Command, a new threat was mentioned. Fast twin-engine aircraft. Attacked before crash dive could be executed. Came from nowhere. At first they assumed exaggeration. Fear under pressure. Yet the pattern grew undeniable. U-boats were being caught on the surface in daylight and at dusk. Not by lumbering patrol bombers. Not by escort carriers alone. But by something else. Something fast enough to surprise them. Something lethal enough to finish them. That aircraft had been dismissed before it ever flew. When British aircraft designer Geoffrey de Havilland proposed building a high-performance combat aircraft largely out of wood, many in the Air Ministry scoffed. Wood was for trainers. For gliders. Not for frontline combat machines in a mechanized war. But de Havilland understood something others did not. Speed was armor. Instead of loading an aircraft down with heavy defensive guns and thick plating, he envisioned a sleek, lightweight machine powered by 2 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines. Strip away the excess. Remove the turrets. Focus on aerodynamics. The result was an aircraft that would outrun many fighters, fly higher than expected, and carry a bomb load comparable to medium bombers, all while being constructed from plywood and balsa sandwiched together in a revolutionary composite design. The British called it the de Havilland Mosquito. The Germans would give it another name. Holzflugzeug. The wooden airplane. They laughed at first. They stopped laughing by 1943. Because this wooden machine could reach speeds over 400 miles per hour. Faster than many Luftwaffe fighters at the time. Faster than the reaction time of submarine crews scanning the horizon. For U-boat commanders, the most vulnerable moment was on the surface. And the Mosquito thrived in that vulnerability window. Equipped with airborne radar, ASV sets capable of detecting surface submarines, Mosquito crews hunted over the Atlantic, the North Sea, and the Bay of Biscay. When radar blips appeared on their scopes, they descended fast and low. Sometimes under 50 feet above the waves. Sometimes so low that salt spray struck the fuselage. They approached at high speed. No long warning. No dramatic buildup. Just a sudden roar and then cannon fire. The Mosquito FBMK-6 variant carried 4 20mm Hispano cannons and 4.303 machine guns in its nose. Later, some variants mounted rockets beneath the wings. 8 solid projectiles capable of tearing open a submarine's hull or smashing its deck guns. A U-boat required precious seconds to crash dive. Hatches had to close. Crew had to descend. Ballast tanks had to flood. Under attack by a Mosquito, those seconds vanished. The aircraft's speed meant it was often within firing range before the submarine could fully submerge. Cannon shells raked across conning towers. Rockets exploded across steel plating. Deck gunners attempting to fight back were cut down in seconds. And because the Mosquito was fast, it was hard to hit. German flak crews reported frustration. By the time they aligned their guns, the aircraft was already passing overhead. Its wooden construction even reduced radar visibility, complicating detection further. But the Mosquito was more than just a U-boat hunter. It was a pathfinder, a precision bomber, a night fighter, a reconnaissance platform, a fighter bomber that could strike Gestapo headquarters in broad daylight. It carried cameras over Berlin. It delivered pinpoint bombing raids against prisons to free resistance fighters. It operated in North Africa, Italy, Norway, and beyond. Was versatile. But over the Atlantic it was ruthless. The turning point in the Battle of the Atlantic did not come from a single weapon. It came from coordination, escort carriers, improved sonar, better convoy tactics, long-range liberators, and fast-strike aircraft like the Mosquito that closed the air gap. By mid-1943, U-boat losses began climbing at catastrophic rates. Submarine commanders realized they were no longer the hunters. They were prey. And among the most feared predators in the sky was the slim wooden aircraft screaming in at mast height, sunlight flashing off its canopy, Merlin engines howling like mechanical wolves. Its silhouette was clean, almost elegant. But for a U-boat crew caught on the surface, it meant chaos. Explosions, splintered steel, oil in the water, and sometimes, silence. The Mosquito had been designed to be fast. It became something more. It became decisive. And in the Cold War over the Atlantic, where supply lines determined survival, that speed, that audacity, that radical wooden design, helped shift the balance. The wolf packs had ruled the sea lanes. Now something ruled the air above them. It's not metal. It's wood. And it's faster than almost anything in the sky. This is the story of the aircraft the Germans couldn't catch. The submarine crews feared more than depth charges. The wooden fighter that became one of the deadliest U-boat killers of the Second World War. This is the story. By 1942, Britain stood on a knife's edge. The Battle of the Atlantic was not a sideshow, it was existential. Without imports, Britain would starve. Without fuel, its air force would wither. Without ammunition, its armies would falter. German U-boats targeted merchant shipping relentlessly. Operating in wolf packs, they attacked at night, coordinating via radio. Early Allied air coverage was limited in range. There existed a deadly mid-Atlantic gap, where convoys had little to no air protection. Submarines exploited it ruthlessly. The Allies needed speed. They needed reach. They needed aircraft capable of long patrols and rapid strike. Enter the Mosquito. While heavy bombers struck cities and factories, Mosquito squadrons began adapting to maritime strike roles. Coastal Command integrated radar technology with high-performance aircraft. The doctrine shifted: detect, descend, destroy, before submersion. The Mosquito was perfectly suited to this evolving tactical environment. 2. Technical advantages: speed as survival. 2 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines. Over 1,600 horsepower each in later variants. Maximum speeds exceeding 400 miles per hour. Operational ceiling above 35,000 feet. Range sufficient for deep patrol sweeps. But raw numbers tell only part of the story. The Mosquito's wooden monocoque fuselage reduced weight dramatically. No heavy defensive turrets. No unnecessary bulk. Clean aerodynamic lines minimized drag. Its structure absorbed battle damage differently than metal, sometimes splintering rather than shattering catastrophically. Armament in the FB-Mk6 variant was devastating for maritime strike. 4 by 20 mm Hispano cannons. 4 by .303 Browning machine guns. Up to 8 RP-3 rockets underwing. Or 500 pounds bombs for alternative strike missions. In anti-shipping operations, Mosquitoes often flew in pairs or small formations. They would approach at wave-top height, 30 to 50 feet above the sea, using the horizon to mask their approach. Radar contact. Throttle forward. Dive shallow. Fire. Pull up hard. The speed compressed engagement time to seconds. For submarine crews, that compression was fatal. 3. Combat story: Bay of Biscay hunts. By 1943, the Bay of Biscay had become a hunting ground. German U-boats transited through it en route to Atlantic patrol zones. The Luftwaffe attempted to provide cover, but Allied air superiority increasingly threatened the corridor. Mosquito squadrons from RAF Coastal Command patrolled these waters aggressively. One typical engagement unfolded like this. Radar operator detects surface contact at 12 miles. Pilot descends from 3,000 feet to sea level. Speed builds to over 350 miles per hour. The U-boat spots the aircraft at perhaps 1 mile, less than 10 seconds from weapons range. Deck gun crew scrambles. The Mosquito opens fire first. 20 mm shells hammer the conning tower. Machine gun tracers stitch across exposed crew. Rockets launch, white smoke trails streaking across gray sky. Impact. If the submarine survives the initial barrage, it crash dives, but often damaged, leaking, or with casualties that reduce effectiveness for the remainder of patrol. Repeated attacks like this forced U-boats to spend more time submerged, reducing speed and operational endurance. It was strategic attrition from the air. For enemy perspective, why they feared it. German reports described the Mosquito as extremely fast and difficult to engage. Luftwaffe fighters struggled to intercept it. Attempts to counter it with heavier flak on submarines often failed because reaction windows were too short. For submarine commanders, morale suffered. The ocean no longer felt vast and protective. It felt exposed. The knowledge that a radar-equipped aircraft could appear with minimal warning altered behavior. Caution increased. Surfacing time shortened. Risk tolerance diminished. That psychological pressure mattered. War is fought in steel and fuel, but also in fear. 5. Strategic impact. By mid-1943, U-boat losses spiked dramatically. Allied air power, including long-range liberators and fast-strike aircraft like the Mosquito, closed operational gaps. The Atlantic supply line stabilized. American troops, tanks, and fuel flowed into Britain in preparation for D-Day. Without maritime air supremacy, Operation Overlord would have faced catastrophic logistical barriers. The Mosquito did not win the Battle of the Atlantic alone, but it accelerated the tipping point. It turned fleeting radar contacts into destroyed submarines. It transformed speed into strategic leverage. And in doing so, it helped secure the sea lanes that made Allied victory possible. It was never supposed to work. A combat aircraft built of wood. Laughed at. Dismissed. Questioned. Yet over dark Atlantic waters, it became a predator. It outran fighters. It outmaneuvered expectations. It struck before submarines could dive. The Mosquito proved that innovation, not convention, wins wars. And long after the guns fell silent, its legacy remained clear. Speed can be armor. Precision can be power. And sometimes, the deadliest weapon in the sky isn't forged in steel. It's built from wood. The de Havilland Mosquito defied doctrine. In an era obsessed with armor thickness and defensive gun turrets, it bet everything on velocity and design efficiency. It rejected the idea that survival required bulk. Instead, it embraced aerodynamic purity. And history validated that gamble. Over Europe, it executed precision strikes against high-value targets. It slipped through German defenses in daylight raids that embarrassed the Luftwaffe. It escorted bombers. It hunted night fighters. It carried cameras deep into enemy territory. But over the Atlantic, it did something equally vital. It enforced vulnerability upon a weapon that had once seemed unstoppable. The U-boat had terrorized shipping lanes. It had nearly broken Britain. It had forced the Allies into desperate innovation. The Mosquito became part of that answer. By compressing detection to attack time, it altered submarine tactics permanently. By combining radar, speed, and concentrated firepower, it forced German naval planners to reconsider surface transit. It reduced operational freedom. It contributed to the cumulative air dominance that made transatlantic logistics viable again. And logistics win wars. The image of the Mosquito, twin engines roaring, slim fuselage cutting through gray skies, remains iconic not just because it was fast, but because it was effective across roles. Few aircraft in history achieved such versatility without sacrificing excellence. Fighter, bomber, reconnaissance platform, maritime strike aircraft. It excelled at all of them. After the war, pilots remembered it not as fragile wood, but as responsive, powerful, and alive beneath their hands. Many called it one of the finest aircraft ever built. The German High Command, once dismissive, ultimately acknowledged it as one of the most troublesome Allied aircraft they faced. And perhaps that is the true measure of its legacy. Not the material it was built from. Not the speed figures in technical manuals. But the strategic effect it imposed. In war, innovation often looks risky at first. Unconventional. Even foolish. The Mosquito reminds us that breakthroughs rarely emerge from consensus. They emerge from conviction. From engineers willing to challenge orthodoxy. From crews willing to fly low over hostile seas at 350 miles per hour. From decisions made in quiet design offices that echo across battlefields. The Atlantic grew quieter as U-boat losses mounted. Convoys arrived. Preparations for liberation accelerated. And somewhere over cold gray water, a wooden aircraft proved that imagination can be as decisive as firepower. Because sometimes the machine that changes a war doesn't look intimidating. It looks improbable. And then it flies faster than anyone thought possible. The RAF Mosquito was not just an aircraft. It was proof that innovation, executed with precision, can tilt the balance of history. And over the Atlantic, where survival depended on speed and timing, that wooden predator did exactly that.